welcome to Coming Home to Self, a home yoga practice series. My name is Jennifer and I'm coming to you from my home in Brooklyn, New York. And in this first video, we'll explore the earth element and the foundational principles of setting up a yoga practice in your home. So a couple of housekeeping before we actually get into movement, which is really essential to understanding how the earth element will work for your yoga practice. First of all, we come into the earth element first because oftentimes we come to our practice, we come to our mat being in a very kind of airy brain space, whether we're coming from work or from school or from another part of our lives and coming to a yoga studio, a yoga class, or making space in your day to roll out your yoga mat at home. There's often a transition that has to happen between thinking mode and kind of embodiment mode. So the earth element, which our bodies are all earth, all matter, that really helps us to come into our bodies and kind of separate from our minds for a little bit, so that we can start to calm the nervous system and lower the vibrations of our energy that's kind of constantly up here. So that's why we always begin with the earth element. And there are a couple of ways that we can move into the earth element through our bodies, but before any of that happens, you can think about how you might set up when you go to your yoga class at a yoga studio if you're used to practicing there. So you kind of gather your space. And if we're thinking about coming home and building a home, we really want to make sure that the foundation of our practice, not only in our bodies, but also in the physical space where we're practicing, is well-rounded and essential and soft and welcoming, so that the entire experience of our practice has all of those qualities as well. So first of all, we want to actually set up a physical space where we can do our practice. And for those of you who have been practicing during a quarantine or isolation mode, you might have already set up a space in your home that you used for your practice, but not everybody has a whole room or even a corner of a room that they can devote to at-home yoga studio. So having a space that you feel is quiet, separate from work or eating or other activities that you do, space where you can spread your arms, spread your legs, kind of be in the full expansiveness of your body is really important. So either clearing a physical space such that you have that space always available, your mat might be out all the time, or maybe you have something that you can move easily, something like a rolling cart or a chair that you can kind of move around simply, so that having the space isn't a deterrent to coming to the practice, because oftentimes if there's something in the way, it's like, oh, I gotta move that thing, and you're not gonna do it. So making sure that you have the physical space available is super important to just setting up the foundation. Other things that you can incorporate is thinking of the other elements and the other senses. So not only do we have the physical space, but we want to make that space inviting and joyful. So thinking about scent, if you have candles or essential oils or incense, things like that, that will help to bring in a sense of pleasing scent, something that you like to look at, pretty colors, muted colors, a painting, flowers, something that will kind of satisfy the eyes and the sense of sight. Music is also a huge part of my personal practice and all of the classes that I teach, so having some music playing in the background might be good if you're into that, but having a silent practice can also be nice, and really just listening to the music of your breath. When I'm listening to music for my practice, I often choose songs that don't have any words or have Sanskrit mantras, which help me to, again, kind of come out of my mind. I'm not trying to think of the lyrics and listen and follow along, but just letting the sound wash over me and kind of lower the vibrations that might have been kind of up high from earlier in the day. Also a sense of touch. Are the surfaces that you're on soft and forgiving, or are they hard and kind of abrasive on your bones and on your joints? So thinking about that can all be useful for setting up your practice. And as you can see, I have here in my space a little kind of mini altar where I have a candle and some dry flowers and this pretty wall hanging that I like to cultivate and have it be my little home altar. And I have a link on my website if you're interested in how to create a home altar. So I'll include that in the notes to this video as well. So the last bit of housekeeping before we get into our movement is actually having some yoga props. And again, if you're used to practicing and for the last few months in quarantine, you might have already MacGyvered your own props at home, but just going over some of the essentials that we need. Perhaps if you're used to practicing in a studio, you kind of walk in and all of the props are there for you, and maybe you didn't even participate with props. Maybe you chose not to for whatever reason. But props are not a crutch. Those two words are not synonymous in any context really, but especially in yoga. So props are not necessarily something you need, quote unquote, because there's a shortcoming or a lack of access in the body, but can just make postures more comfortable and kind of give you feedback and information about yourself that you wouldn't have gained otherwise. If you think about it in a kind of more theatrical way, how we think of props on a stage, actors can easily act out a drama or a scene without any props at all. They pantomime, you can totally get the idea of what they're doing without any props. But imagine seeing a play with no props versus seeing a play with a huge set and beautiful objects that the actors can interact with, and it's just so much more meaningful. You get so much more information from those materials. So that's how I like to think of props. And for my home practice, I usually have one or two pillows. So as you saw, I was just sitting on one of my pillows. And the pillows are nice for grounding at the beginning of practice, but also for the end of practice. So you'll find that we use the props mostly at the beginning and at the end, and then as needed in the middle. So essential for kind of bookending the practice. So the pillows are really nice for seated centering at the beginning of practice. You can also make yourself a bolster out of pillows if you don't have a bolster, which is one of the props that I don't have at home, but I really use my pillows as a kind of faux bolster if you just put them next to each other. And having longer bed pillows is also an option to kind of cover the length of your torso if you're deciding to lay on your pillows. A couple of blankets or towels, and you could just use regular old bath towels or a bed blanket or a couch blanket, a throw blanket that you have around. About texture, it's kind of important to think about the texture of your surfaces. So this blanket, for instance, is pretty soft and fluffy, so it's nice to use for restorative postures or for lying down on the mat if you want a little bit of softness. But a more firm towel or a denser blanket might be nice if you're using your blanket for as a spacer or to give yourself any kind of specific feedback in a posture. So having two options can be nice as well. I also like to have a yoga strap. I have a kind of official yoga strap with a buckle here, but you can also use a scarf, a regular belt. You might want to be careful with a regular belt, like a leather belt for pants, just to make sure that, again, the surface is pliable and soft so that when you put it on your body, it's not going to cause pain. And have it be adjustable because you want to be able to use the straps in a variety of ways. So just having one length can be a challenge if you're kind of buckling a regular belt with holes in it. You could also use stretchy bands, TheraBands or resistance bands. They have different qualities, of course. If you're going for something that you want some feedback for, a regular strap will be better for that. But stretchy bands are really wonderful for all sorts of different stretches and different ways to give you feedback. And then, of course, yoga blocks. So one or two yoga blocks are really helpful. If you don't have blocks, you can use a thick book or kind of container or shoebox. I just recommend making putting some rubber bands around whatever you're using to make sure that the book doesn't open up on you while you're doing a posture, so there's a really solid surface. Same with the shoebox. If the shoebox is empty, you might want to put something in it, some tissue paper or newspaper, just to give it some density so that if you lean on it, you don't crush it with your body weight. So those are the props, and you can kind of have them in an area where you set up your mat so that they're always accessible to you. And the last and most important prop perhaps is our yoga mat, which you might have at home. You might have been used to practicing on a mat from a studio. Making an investment in a good yoga mat is really worthwhile in my opinion, so that you can get a full kind of lifespan of your mat and you don't find yourself coming off with like flakes of rubber all over your skin all the time. I love jade yoga mats. They have a really nice cushion to them and some feedback for my hands and feet. There's a grippiness to it. It's also made of a biodegradable substance, so that's always something that I'm looking out for, the environmental impact of my materials. Manduka mats are also really nice. They have a kind of thickness and density to them that can be useful for certain elements of the practice. And if you travel a lot, you might want to get a kind of a thinner mat that you can pack up or fold up easily to put in your suitcase. But think about the actual quality of the surface that you'll be practicing on. As you can see, I have a rug under my mat, so it's already a little bit cushier. But if you're practicing just on hardwood or even on cement, you might also want to just think about the thickness of your mat and make sure that it's enough to cushion your bones, especially in these opening postures when we're coming down. So we'll start now with a couple of sequences that I really like to use to ground my energy at the beginning of a yoga practice. So I will set up a couple of my props just so that I can have them ready for when we get into them. So I'm just going to roll a blanket up here and have it off to the side for a moment. In a moment, I'll put it back here. And so one of the first ways to ground the body is to lay on the ground. So coming to the ground is a really wonderful thing to do, especially if you're practicing at the end of the day when you've been kind of up and active for a lot of the day. And having a good amount of the body on the floor just helps to ground the nervous system and bring you into a sense of safety. And you can kind of notice the feedback that you're getting from all of these surfaces along the torso and in the feet. Eyes closed is a really wonderful way to start, but if that's uncomfortable, you can always have your eyes just gazing very softly at the ceiling, so just a kind of blurring of the vision. And taking a few moments to really settle in here can seem maybe superfluous or like you want to get moving right away, but just taking a moment to pause at the beginning can mark a kind of transition from what you were doing before your practice and then coming to your mat. So I like to breathe here for a few moments. And as you can see, we're already incorporating more than one element here in this grounding part of our sequence. So coming to the breath with some very kind of general pranayama elements is also a really important part of setting the foundation for practice. So I like to focus on a pretty simple diaphragmatic breath, feeling the breath coming in through my nose, cycling through the body and filling my belly and torso, and then exhaling, emptying from bottom to top. Inhale, coming in from the top. And exhale, coming out from below. So you can think of this breath almost like a wave, like an ocean wave, swelling and filling you from the top, and then pulling away from the shore as you breathe out. Having hands on your body can be a way to get the feedback of your own earth element, your own physical shape, responding to the breath. You can also add in other movements that help you to sync your breath with your physical body for right now. So inhaling to lift the arms up and overhead, and then exhaling to lower them down can be a really simple vinyasa, a simple flow that helps you come into your breathing. Another very favorite posture of mine for opening practices are just a couple of bridge pose variations. So you can sync the arm movement with your breath and some hip movement. So exhaling as your arms come down, your hips lift up, letting the emptiness of your breath in help you to push into the floor and lift the hips. And then inhaling to lower down. You'll notice that a lot of these opening movements have to do a lot with the lower half of the body. So the feet, the legs, the hips. You can imagine your legs like the trunks of a tree here, just really rooting down as your feet spread wide like a big root system, going down as well as out. Taking a few rounds like this. Really allowing the body to push against the floor and then softly surrender to the floor. So after we do a few of these, we might come into some other leg work. You can always take your strap and do some supta padangustasanas, taking a folded strap and just looping the strap around your foot. You can keep the opposite leg bent, and then again, syncing breath with movement, bending the knee as you exhale, and then pressing up into the strap as you inhale. Good. Using the emptying of the breath to help you bring the leg closer, and stretching the backs of the legs very gently. So you can very much keep your knee bent in these supta padangustasana variations. And then we would switch and do the other side, of course. Letting the strap come onto the ball of the foot, and you might notice that one leg feels very different from the other, and coming into a sense of reality with our physical form. Our asymmetries, our tight spots where we grip and hold habitually, is also part of the grounding part of our sequence. And so after we kind of come into those gentle movements, another part of the grounding work I like to do at this time is a bit of core work, some core stability for the hips and for the trunk. So one of the ways that I like to incorporate this is by adding on to that hip flow. So you can exhale to lift the hips up, inhale to lift the arms back. Good. And then exhale to draw the knees up, and inhale to tap the toes down. Exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, legs come up. Inhale, legs tap down. Exhale, knees lift. Inhale, feet down, arms down. Exhale, we'll do one more like this. Inhale, arms up. You could always leave your arms down. Exhale, legs up. And inhale, tap down. Exhale. And inhale. Another way to come into some core is some simple psoas work. The psoas being the muscle that connects the lower half of the body to the upper half of the body. It's this very important muscle for the nervous system. So one way to come into that is to bring your legs to a tabletop position and then press your hands into your legs very vigorously so that you feel a resistance, again, a sense of grounding, a sense of earth heaviness in your hands and in your legs. Holding here is a lot of work, or you can bring one arm up and then stretch arm and leg away from one another and come back in. So some bird dog variations here. You can stay on opposite hand, same arm, same hand, or you can switch it up, bringing the opposite hand, and then you do opposite arm, opposite leg. So that's a very simple way to come into the psoas. And then to release the core, we want to come into some twists. So letting the knees come over to one side, letting the opposite arm open up, and then switching sides. And you can always make these kind of switches, these twists dynamic. So you can bring your feet to the floor and sway your knees side to side. That's always very nice and calming. Helps to massage the sacrum and really get into the root chakra, the chakra responsible for our sense of safety and security, having our basic needs met. And then when you're done with that, you can come on up. And another way to begin your practice, your home practice, with a sense of grounding in the earth element, either separately from those lying on the ground, those supine positions, or on its own, is starting in child's pose. So child's pose kind of flips the orientation of our relationship to the ground. So it can be very nice if you're feeling vulnerable or anxious to have the chest towards the floor instead of up and open to the sky in a kind of more vulnerable position. So one way to come into child's pose is to use the blanket. So what I did was made a small roll with my towel here. And I chose my towel because it's a little bit denser. It'll give me some more feedback in my hips. So putting the blanket roll right at the hip crease, pulling it off to the side, lifting up, and then rolling over, letting my head come down, and then depending on what I want to do, I'll come up so that you can hear me. Depending on what I want to do energetically, you can let the arms relax or let them stretch out and kind of feel a lengthening. So letting the head come down, the arms come down by the sides, even down by your feet. Or stretching them overhead. And what the blanket is helping me to feel here is just to get a little bit of feedback with my breath. So I'm able to breathe more fully into the backs of the lungs and feel my belly push into the blanket, and then exhale. Feel a real softening in, a kind of heavying of the torso. And then you could do all sorts of things here. You can come to the side and stretch. And come to the other side and stretch. And then the last thing, that's a really nice way to come into the sense of grounding at the beginning of your practice, is of course in a seated position. So I will sit here in Sukhasana on my pillow, and you might want to have one or two pillows, or you can use your towels or blankets. And we'll come into Sukhasana, so bringing the shins to cross right at the center so that the feet are underneath the knees. The hips are a little bit elevated so that there's an ease in that psoas, so that we're not gripping there. And then the hands can come onto the thighs. Palms face down is always a more grounding choice. Palms into the center in Namaste can also help to anchor the hands, which are such outward expressions of our being. Many of us communicate with our hands and literally give so much with our physical hands. So coming into this posture of connecting the palms, connecting them to the heart in particular, can help to transition that giving energy back to yourself. Taking a few moments of quiet is where you might also set an intention for practice. Having an intention is one of the main ways that a yoga practice is different from many other kinds of movement. And your intention can be anything at all, but it's something like a North Star I like to think of. Whenever you get lost in your practice, either you're confused about what to do next or what the teacher is saying, or your mind starts to wander off, the intention is what anchors you. It's that stability when things go off course. So having your intention here in a moment of your sitting bones rooted, your legs rooted, allowing yourself to be held up from below, reinforces the anchoring quality of the intention. We often sound Om at the beginning of our practice to officially begin. And so to honor that tradition, we'll sound Om together. Take a comfortable breath in, an easy breath out. Inhale for Om. Om. And by signaling Namaste to ourselves at the beginning of practice, we also set an intention of honoring the divine light within ourselves, which is part of the experience we're setting up in our homes. So that's the earth element for you. Grounding with your physical environment, with the props that you have on hand, and with the movements that you do in your body. And you can incorporate this grounding element into the whole yoga practice. So you can set up a practice that's mainly restorative, which I'll have another video on, that really just lets you be on the ground the entire time. Wherever you set the gaze can also be a huge part of a grounding element. So looking down towards the floor can help to have that feeling of heavying. Breathing deeply and fully exhaling can also help to heavy the quality of your practice. So if that's something that might serve you at any point, you can really bring in that element into the entirety of your sequence. So thank you again for joining, and I'll see you next time. Namaste.